Good morning, everybody. There are a lot of different classes in Dungeons & Dragons Online, and some of them are seen as being more complicated than others. Today, we're going to talk about what is being perceived as the most complex class, the Alchemist. The Alchemist is actually not as complicated as it might otherwise look, but there are some elements that are mildly scary about it that we're going to talk about when we get there. However, once you start playing Alchemist, you will fall in love just like I did. Let's start with the basics. And the basics for Alchemist is that Alchemists are really simple when it comes to their stats. You might notice I have a lot of really bad numbers here, and that's because they're not important. Intelligence, Constitution, and a little bit of strength so you don't get overloaded on gear is all you need. But you might be wondering, but Strimtom, if my dex is low, how am I going to make reflex saves? If my wisdom is low, how am I going to make will saves? How do I do that? And that's where Alchemist cheats. It's a cheaty pumpkin eater. You see, Alchemist gets intelligence here. Intelligence is their main stat. They use it for casting spells, they use it for their skills, they use it for literally everything. In fact, they use it for so much everything, they get to use their intelligence for their reflex saves as well. And at higher level, they get to use their intelligence for their will saves too. Which means dexterity and wisdom have no impact on the Alchemist, just intelligence and just constitution. That's one of the reasons why I recommend going as a gnome, as gnomes get a really high amount of intelligence. Getting that extra intelligence is very nice during the leveling process because, again, it does allow them to just have more spell points. Their spells are harder to resist. So that's pretty much it. Intelligence and Constitution. Again, very simple. When it comes to skills for alchemists, their skill choices are also pretty straightforward and simple as well. We grab all the basic stuff, concentration, some haggle so you don't run out of money, healing, because this increases the power of your healing spells, as well as your negative spells, spellcraft, which increases damage of the rest of your spells, so you have lots of spell damage. Search, because you have intelligence, this allows you to search for secret doors. You can't find traps with this, although if you decided to multi-class with rogue, you can, but instead this will let you keep track of secret doors, which is really nice. Some tumble for tumbling, and some jump for being able to jump up and down. I don't max out jump, but I do like having some jump to move around, as well as balance for getting back up and for some feat requirements. Now, I want to talk about Alchemist feats, but first I have to talk about the elephant in the room. And that elephant being the Alchemist reagent menu. You see, Alchemists have a whole bunch of different spells, but you're going to notice that they are deeply color-coded. For example, I have a blue spell here. This blue spell is a ceruleite spell. It says primer element ceruleite in it. If you are colorblind, you can read this text. The text is colored, but you can read its primer element is ceruleite. And if you're not colorblind, you can see that the icon is physically blue. When I decide to cast this spell, like so, I will enter a reaction, or I'm applying this to my reaction. So you can see my most recent spell color is blue. You combine colors, and in doing so, you get a new color up here, a new reaction color, and that gives you a bonus. So for example, if I take Cure Moderate Wounds, and if I mouse over it, it says Primer Element is Guildleaf, and I cast it, and I put it on, I actually prepare it. Let me just prepare this spell here. Yep, get this out of here, put this here. If I cast it, my character will all of a sudden add yellow, and yellow plus blue equals green. That's how Alchemist functions. Now you might be wondering, what exactly does that mean? Yellow plus blue equals green? Why do I care about that? And that's where we get into the complicated part of alchemy, which is alchemical spellcasting. Now, this is a really long menu that is actually extremely detailed and explains it in short order. But I'm going to summarize it for you. If you want greater detail, you can deeply read into this, but I'm going to do my best to summarize exactly what this is saying. Basically, all of your spells that you have are organized into colors. Blue spells are ceruleite, yellow spells are guildleaf, and red spells are crimsonite. When you combine them, you get the composite color. So if I cast a blue and a yellow, I get green, which gives me verdonite as a reaction. If I cast yellow and then I cast red, I get pyrite, which is orange, as a reaction. And if I cast blue and I cast red, I get orchidium or purple as a reaction. So what do these mean? Basically, the different reaction states give you a buff for your character based on what it is you're trying to do. So if I'm in pyrite, which is yellow and orange, that gives me a spell damage buff. If I'm in verdonite, which is green, that gives me a healing buff. And if I'm in orchidium, which is purple, I get a defense buff. I take less damage. How do you keep track? which state you're in, you get this little menu here, and it changes whenever you cast a spell. However, it doesn't just keep track of that. You don't really need to do that 99% of the time. You see, the actual enhancement trees for the Alchemist are literally color-coded. If you can't see the colors, Bombardier is orange, Apothecary is green, and Alchemist is purple. These are the reaction states you want to be when using these trees. Now you might ask yourself, but how? How am I going to keep track of this? Well, if I'm Bombardier, which is what this is designed to do, Bombardier is dangerous alchemical spellcasting, basically killing people with magic spells. I need orange, which means I need to cast yellow and red spells, so Guildleaf and Crimsonite. However, Crimsonite spells are exclusively damage, and yellow spells are pretty much exclusively damage and healing. So to keep in the yellow stance, you cast damage and healing, which is what you want to do if you're a Bombardier. So remember how I said it looks complicated? It's actually not complicated. I want to be a Bombardier, so I cast the yellow and the red spells, because those are the ones that do damage and heal, and I'm always in the right color combination. For Apothecary, you want to cast the blue as well as the green spell or yellow spells. Well, yellow spells we already established are healing. Some of them have damage, but what do the blue spells do? Well, blue spells are mostly crowd control and buffs. So if you're an Apothecary, a healer, well then you're casting healing spells, some damage, buffs, crowd control. Seems good. It's exactly what you want to do, and then you get healing bonuses. And lastly, Alchemist needs to cast the red and the purple spells. This one's the hardest to justify, because if you cast a heal spell, you will break your reaction state, you'll lose purple, and then you'll have to go back. There are no blue or red healing spells, which is kind of annoying, but casting crowd control spells, casting offensive spells is how you keep yourself in purple. So it seems like it's a little scary, but it's pretty straightforward. However, there's one extra thing I want to talk about with the reaction state, which is called the reaction spike, which is easily explained with the little feat here. Basically, when you first enter a reaction state for 12 seconds, you get a bonus, and this is where the complexity can start to creep in. When you're leveling, you won't need to pay attention at all. If you follow this guide, you'll be in Pyrite 99% of the time once you're in a quest, and it just gives you passive spell power, which is really good. However, if you're used to spiking, which is you break your reaction by casting another spell and then go back into it, Pyrite gives you a massive spell power boost and half spell costs during the first 12 seconds. Verdonite gives you a massive healing spell power burst and a whole bunch of extra transmutation and conjuration spell DCs, and Orchidium gives you a disgusting amount of physical resistance rating. This is how some people were hitting Alchemist with like 300 to 400 physical resistance rating when this first came out. Then people were posting screenshots with like 700 physical resistance rating because of how powerful the Orchidium stance is. So these are things you can do, but if you're just playing Alchemist, all you're going to do is go, okay, I buff with the blue spells because I get Liquid Courage, which gives me Heroism, which is a defensive buff. That's awesome. I cast all my blue spells when I enter the quest, and then I only cast the yellow ones, so Guildleaf, and the red ones, Crimsonite. Cool. So, with that being said, we're going to break down spells and how exactly spells work for the Alchemist. If I mouse over one of my spells here, Vile Smash, you can see the anatomy of a spell. It has a cooldown of 6 seconds. You can also see the targeting and how it works, although you can just try to cast it once you're inside of a quest to get a feel for it. It tells you its save, which is a reflex save here, how much spell point or how many spell points it costs, what school it belongs to, which for the Alchemist, all of their damaging spells are conjuration or transmutation. That's pretty much all they use is conjuration and transmutation. The caster level and its cap, as well as what metamagic's affected, and then of course the primer element in the description of the spell. So if I want to cast Vile Smash Acid, the way that I want to actually scale my spell is I want to have relevant spell power for it. So it says it does 2 to 7 acid damage per caster level. So I want to have acid spell power because it'll increase my damage, because every single spellcaster uses this little tab here, which gives you your spell damage numbers. These come from your spell powers. So by being an alchemist, I get spell power, but also if I pick up an item that gives me a bonus, let's say bonus to my acid spell power, that'll affect my acid spell damage as an example. And that shows how much damage I have here. Now, the caster level is basically your level. So because I'm a level 7 alchemist and I get a bonus from a feat, it gives me 8th level caster, but it's of course capped at level 5. It says capped at 5 because lower level spells have caps on them to encourage you to use higher level spells. So if I go to my higher level spell list, instead I could run Caustic Solvent, which costs a little bit more spell points, but instead it does 4 to 9 acid damage, which is a big bump from 2 to 7, and it goes up to cast level 15, so I'm not capped anymore, so it'll actually do a lot more. So again, you have that as an option. Now, when it comes to understanding how to scale your spells and how to make them more powerful, we talked about the spell damage with spell power, but then the next thing, there is also the school. So this is school conjuration, and the saving throw is 16. To make this harder to resist, because the 16 is what the enemy has to roll to resist my effect, we want to resist it, or to make it harder to resist by increasing your intelligence, as well as bonuses for the individual spell school. So for example, getting items that give more intelligence, enhancements that give intelligence, or things that give bonuses to conjuration DCs. As an example, in the Bombardier tree, there's just this that says +2 to conjuration DCs, so it makes opponents 10% less likely to actually resist your spell effects. In a nutshell, that is how all of your spells are going to work. Now, you are, in fact, a spellcaster, just like a wizard, who can inscribe spells in their book, and you can swap out spells at will and say, I don't want this, I would actually like this spell, and kind of just swap things around. Now, if you're free to play, you'll have to do this in a tavern, but if you're pay to play, like myself, you can just do it anywhere in the world, just swap out your spells whenever you want. However, you actually don't have all of your spells, so what you're going to have to do is learn all of them. So I'm going to show you where you can actually go to learn all of your spells, because it is relatively important, although I'm stuck under this. I'm going to fall all the way down here. I'm going to edit this out. All right, so to learn all your spells, you're going to head up to House Jurasco, and we're going to head over into one of the magic shops that are there to actually be able to learn and buy all of your spells. Now, alchemists don't learn spells through scrolls because all of their spells are actually completely unique. They don't share any spells with any other classes except for the admixtures. So instead, an alchemist is going to learn spells from an alchemical recipe. Now, the recipes are not like scrolls. You can't just cast them. So if you buy a scroll of Raise Dead, you can use magic device to be able to cast the scroll and cast the spell. With alchemists, you can't actually do that. You're not capable of doing that. Instead, you actually have to just learn them. And how do you do that? Well, once you're in the House of Wizardry here, you're going to come over to Aramir Palance, the level 4/5 Arcane Scroll Vendor. Why is it this guy? I don't know. But you say, hey, do you have any alchemist recipes? And then when he says yes, you go first level spells, and here are every single alchemist recipe in the game, every single spell, as well as the inscription materials. So you go here, you buy one of each, you buy the inscription materials, and then you learn them all using the Inscribe Alchemy recipe. Now, one of the reasons why you want to do this is because, for reasons I don't know, I think it's just a bug, there actually are some alchemy spells or alchemist spells that are not learnable from this guy. He doesn't sell the recipe. And so if you don't learn them here, you never get the spells. So what I would recommend you do is once you get the relevant amount of money, or especially once you can learn that spell, let's say you get to like 6th level and you can learn 3rd level spells, come to this guy and then go 3rd level and buy all the spells, and then learn all of them once you're level 6. Don't wait, just get them all right away, because that way when you level up, when you learn new spells, you're guaranteed to make sure you learn the spells that you cannot purchase. Again, these are not found as loot. Unlike in some of the other videos, you might have seen, oh, there's rare artificer scrolls or there's rare wizard scrolls where they're out in the world and you have to find them so you can learn them in your book. You cannot do that for alchemist. I think it is a bug that not all of the spells are available here at this shop vendor, but this is the only way to learn all the spells, and you will have to come here and talk to this guy. So just make sure you do that. Don't forget to do that. Okay, well, after going through all of that, let's continue talking a little bit more about the alchemist in general with some of the feats. So as far as the feats you're going to take while leveling up, you're going to take the meta magic feats. One of the reasons why you take the meta magic feats is because the different meta magic feats improve the power of your spells by making them cost more spell points. So Empower and Maximize increase the damage by giving you 150 and 75 spell power respectively, and Quicken makes your spells cast twice as fast. Now, casting spells this way is actually quite expensive, because if I want to quicken a spell, let's say I take a spell like, I don't know, Vile Smash Acid here. Let's say I decide to use this, so I want to use this spell. Cool. I'm going to put it on my action bar. It costs 4 spell points. But let's Empower and Maximize and Quicken it. If I take all these 3, 1, 2, and 3, well now, all of a sudden, this costs 54 spell points. And I'm going to be honest, it's not doing 11 times damage, so it's way more of a cost than it is to deal with. However, we can actually reduce this and change this in multiple ways. And one of the reasons why you take this is because alchemists get abilities called spell-like abilities. So right here, I get a spell-like ability, and I can choose any different vial, a single target spell. So let's say I want to take Vial of Acid. So I go here, put my point in, I get Vial of Acid, 1, 2, 3. Bada bing, bada boom. And now when I click this little diamond, it's going to open up the page here to the enhancement tree, and I can see my vial of acid. Now, vial of acid is affected by all of these metamagic feats. However, it costs 1. That's right. The cost doesn't increase for spell-like abilities when it comes to metamagic feats. As a result, this spell does, I don't know, like 8 times the damage of this spell, but it costs 1. Isn't that cool? So that's one of the reasons why we use metamagic feats on this character, as well as spell-like abilities. You will be taking your spell-like abilities as you level up, grabbing these things here. You also grab spell-like abilities out of Apothecary and even out of the Gnome tree to allow you to have a lot more damage. And that's how you're going to sustain your spell points. By using almost exclusively spell-like abilities, you have a huge amount of extra spell points sustained, which is really, really nice. And it also gives you a huge amount of extra power. So once you get started, you're going to want to do that. Now, on top of that, we're also going to be taking the feats with regards to conjuration focus. You're going to increase the conjuration focus of your spells, so that way they're harder to resist. It's very important for this character, so you want to do that. And then on top of that, you kind of just take some extra feats for some defense. Your special alchemical spells, you take Alchemical Studies Pyrite, which increases the cast level of your damaging spells. Remember the orange, being in the orange state, the red and yellow spells. And that's pretty much all you do here. Now, alchemists do get Alchemist Knowledge potions, so any potions you do happen to have in your inventory actually are higher level when you drink them because you're an alchemist, so you get like more effect out of them. And they have an ability called Alchemy on the Run. This used to actually be really relevant as you, back in the day in DDO, drinking potions would cause you to stop moving. So alchemists got the ability, Alchemy on the Run, to allow them to drink potions while moving. And then at some point, every character in the game was given that. They just made a baseline feature in DDO. So now, Alchemy on the Run doesn't do anything. But it is neat, and it's a bit of history that's still in the game, which, depending on when you watch this video, may or may not still exist. Now let's talk about the different enhancement trees. Bombardier is interesting because what it does is it basically ramps up your spell damage for individual spell types. So along the cores here, you get to pick up these liquid power, which gives you bonus cast levels of whatever elemental type you get. And you get liquid power 1, you pick an element, you get 2, you pick an element, and you get 3, you pick an element. So 3 different elements you get to increase the power of your spells, which sounds really, really, really good. However, the main draw of Bombardier is not this stuff. It's this stuff up at the top. Specifically this, Weakening Mixture. This is one of the things that makes Alchemist so super crazy ultra good. Weakening Mixture for either acid, cold, electric, fire, or poison states when you damage an enemy with a spell of that type, they lose that immunity. Which means, let's say you have a fire elemental. If you have Weakening Mixture Fire and you hit them with a fire spell, guess what? That fire elemental is no longer immune anymore. So at level 12, you can bypass all immunities of all monsters in the entire game. But you might ask yourself, you might say, Strimtom, this is bad. I don't have to cast 2 spells to break immunity. That seems horrible. How am I going to do that? Well, at level 12, you also get a spell here. I'm just giving an example. The capstone is this. You get the spell Multivial. And what Multivial does is you throw 4 potions at the same time. So the first potion breaks the immunity and the other 3 kills your monster. So as a result, once you get to level 12, Alchemist becomes super duper duper easy street thanks to this. But you also get stuff like Conjuration DCs along the way. You get this thing called Burning Ambition, which just adds extra damage onto your spells, which is kind of fun. You get a bunch of really useful spell-like abilities to save on spell points. And then once you're at epics, instead of using these spell-like abilities, because these are kind of low level, you don't really want to use level 1 spells when you're level 29 or level 34. Instead, you can respend your points into the Efficient Metamagic Seer, Efficient Maximize and Efficient Quicken, to reduce the cost of your metamagic feats. So that way you can just use these on your high level spells instead, while barely paying any of the cost, which is really, really nice. So Bombardier, killing people with elemental magic. Apothecary is all about healing people. So you've got all the different healing spells. We get a healing spell-like ability, a healing spell-like ability, another healing spell-like ability, another healing spell-like ability. So it's all about healing spell-like abilities. Along the way, you also get to pick up extra healing spell critical. I didn't mention, but there's also just like damaging critical over here. So you get healing spell critical, as well as some like just general defensive bonuses and resistances. It's not as flashy or exciting as a tree, but there are some noteworthy things. One, at level 12, you get Spill the Bad Stuff, which is a damage spell that does a random type of damage and also applies a random debuff. So that one's kind of cool. It's you basically like spill a potion of like, I don't know, bad things. And then also, you do get a couple interesting abilities like bonuses for being in Verdunite, like Run for Your Life, where you get 1% bonus movement speed per Alchemist level, which can be kind of nice. You also get Dissolve, where if an enemy is at all like incapacitated, so if they're fascinated, sleeping, dazed, tripped, mesmerized, dancing, paralyzed, petrified, or stunned, you can make him instantly die, which is kind of cool. And you also have a couple different toxins. So you either get Deadly Neurotoxin, which allows you to debuff enemies, or you get Nightshade, which can make enemies fall asleep with no save. And Nightshade is kind of cool because if they fall asleep with no save, you can dissolve them. So again, there's some combo potential there. One of the main reasons why you actually use Apothecary in this build, partially because you get some healing spells, but mostly because you get the Inflict Wounds spells. Now, the Inflict Wounds spells don't actually seem that exciting at first because they deal AoE negative damage. It's like the same things that Undead use, and so usually you wouldn't think this would be very good, but in this case, it damages living things really, really well. And Inflict Light Wounds spell-like ability is actually so crazy. Once you start using it, you realize, oh, this is actually one of the best spells. You then later on get the Inflict Serious Wounds spell-like ability, which is extremely powerful, and you're going to use that as you go through. And then lastly, Alchemist. Alchemist is kind of a hybrid melee range tree where the whole focus is you add an imbue, so you enchant your weapons with different types of like elemental damage. So you add poison damage onto all your weapon attacks, which is pretty cool. And it's all about being in Orchidium. So you get a bunch of bonuses while you're in Orchidium, which again is the blue and the red spell reaction state, the purple one. So you get to add poison damage onto all your attacks. You get bonuses with simple weapons, and then you get specific bonuses with thrown weapons. So this is designed to be partially a thrower tree, where either you're going to be throwing darts or throwing daggers, simple thrown weapons, or using simple weapons like maces or daggers as melee weapons. It kind of does both depending on how you want to play it. You also get abilities like a poisoned attack that allows you to bypass poison immunity. And then, of course, you have Wave of Poison and Greater Wave of Poison, which are abilities that let you bypass poison immunity as well. Because if you're playing a poison character, there's a lot of immunes, and not everybody's going to go top of the Bombardier tree if you want to be a melee character and not a spellcaster. So this way, you have ways to bypass that as well, which can be pretty cool. Overall, Alchemist is not terribly strong. It just kind of lags behind some of the stuff that you get out of like Eldritch Knight or War Priest, but it is cool, and if it is something you want to try, you definitely can. I played Alchemist in the past. In fact, I used to play a character called the Vile Master of Flowers, which was kind of a combination between like Monk, Rogue, Alchemist, and some Grandmaster of Flowers stuff, and it was pretty cool. But overall, just generally not the best tree, mostly because staying in Orchidium is kind of clunky. If you got to heal yourself, you got to drop Orchidium, but again, pretty fun and definitely something you can toy around with. All right, now let's go over some pro tips when it comes to Alchemist. Now, as I mentioned before, the spell-like abilities are kind of the bread and butter of your character. So you might notice I have a whole bunch of different vials here, and that's because this character, one of these I don't want actually. This character is entirely designed around having all of the different metamagic feats applying to all your different spell-like abilities. And I'm going to show you specifically why that's important. So I have this spell here called Vile Smash Acid, so I'm going to go and do a Vile Smash on some enemies here. So there's going to be some kobolds, they're going to run up and attack me, I'm going to hit them with a Vile Smash. So then whoosh. And it does a reasonable amount of damage, but oops, I spent all my spell points from the Empower, Maximize, and the Quicken. Let's try again. And Vile Smash hits for about 40 damage. It's not too bad to hit for 40, but if I cast one of these that still has the metamagic feats turned on, is this? Oh yeah, I turned it all off. I'm doing this wrong. Basically, what you want to do is you want to turn on Maximize, Empower, and Quicken on all your metamagic feats, so that way they only affect these feats or these individual spells, as opposed to having them affect every single spell that you have. So that way, even though this spell costs less, I can still make these other spells not increase in cost because they're spell-like abilities. And yeah, we get to go from there. So I'm just gonna max all these out. I am missing because my arm is tied up in a wrist brace, which is hard to pinpoint things. But anyways, so now I have these spells I can cast that are doing 165 damage. Plus the range on them is pretty good. You have to be careful about ceilings sometimes, but the range ends up being pretty good with a lot of these spells. So this guy charges out at me, I just go whoosh, and the spell hits him, and he takes his entire health bar worth of damage. So again, all of these spells cost basically 1, which is one of the reasons why it's much better to use the spell-like abilities, so you don't have to worry about it. When it comes to reaction states, you'll notice if I drink my Heroism Potion, I get the Orchidium Reaction Spike, so now I have 52 physical resistance rating, and if I want to break it, I cast a yellow spell, so I'm going to cast the Inflict spell, which is now breaking it, and now I'm out of it. And you'll notice I hit all those guys for 100 damage with this level 1 Inflict spell-like ability. Yeah, it's pretty nice. So even though this spell is a level 1 spell, and I don't have any items for it, I just activated Maximize and Empower. These guys surround me, and I go whoosh, and then they're all dead. Except for these guys. These guys are alive. But the benefit of this is my spell costs are super duper low. They're literally 1 point. So I can just go and cast a single spell at every single monster, 1 spell at a time, and everything is going to go down. 1 spell, 1 spell. I don't have to worry about actually running out because I've got, it only takes really 1 spell per monster. So I just keep whipping spell after spell after spell after spell. which means I can end up saving all of my spell points specifically for all of the healing effects. But want to know something that's kind of cool with this character? See how this guy's chasing me? Man, I want to hit him with spells, but I have to run away. I'm really scared and he's going to hit me. You know what's awesome? Alchemists can throw spells backwards. Yeah, you might not have known that. They don't need to be having any type of visual look at enemies. You can run directly away from enemies, and as long as they're targeted, you can throw spells completely backwards, which is pretty sick. Now, I didn't take any healing spells, but I have the Inflict Serious and Cure Serious spell-like abilities right here. So with these two spells, I can either heal myself, so if I target myself, I can cast this spell-like ability to heal by maximizing and empowering it, because it's a spell-like ability. So my character, oh no, I took some damage, well I can press a button and heal for 89. Not too bad, it's basically my entire health bar. Or if it's enemies instead, I can then just maximize and empower this and go and get my enemies. One of the things I will say is for tumbling, you have these little tumble charges here. This is why tumbling comes into play. You want to go into UI settings and not UI, gameplay, and turn on experimental tumble controls. This will allow you to tumble by pressing the block button while moving, which is shift by default, to stay out of harm's way when fighting different types of monsters. But now that I actually have the Inflict Serious Wounds spell, you know, I could use the Inflict Light Wounds, which is pretty good damage, which, you know, that costs how many? 4 points to do all that? Oh no, 2 points to do all that. Or I can use the Inflict Serious, which I got knocked down mid-cast because this guy is too good. He's too powerful, man. Gosh dang you, Rackmill, I'm trying to show this thing off. Anyway, hit him for 740 damage. This class is so stupid. Anyway, you'll notice that I don't have a single damaging spell from my spell book on here, and that's because for leveling Alchemist, you don't really need them. You're just going to cast these spell-like abilities for a very long time until you get spell multi-vial. You can take at level 3, you get some AoE spells for your different elements, so you can pick like Caustic Solvent here and then take all of the acid spells or whatever. You go with that, but yeah. Another thing I want to recommend as well, you'll notice that at level 12, just lock in an element at level 12, then pretty much only cast those spells. You can bypass immunities. Before then, you can kind of use all of them, but once you get to level 12, just decide what type of alchemist you are. The difference doesn't really matter. At the super end game, cold is the best one, but while leveling, it just doesn't matter. And again, the reason I say super end game is there's some really highly optimized, kind of annoying to get effects that can make you better as a cold caster. Outside of that, it doesn't terribly matter. So just pick whichever one you think is cool. Acid's good, fire's good, cold is good, poison is more resisted but kind of neat. It kind of looks good, but yeah, that's it. Alchemist is really straightforward. Run around, cast spells. Now you're going to notice, hey look, I'm casting a yellow spell, that's going to heal me, and then I'm going to cast a red spell, then another red spell, then I'm going to cast another red spell, then I'm going to cast a yellow spell, and as a result you might notice, hey, my reaction isn't changing. That's because it doesn't matter. Don't worry about your reaction state. Sure, maybe later on in the game, you go, I'm going to cast a blue spell, then a yellow spell, then I'm going to cast a red, and then a yellow spell. Boom, I'm actually spiking again for Pyrite. Now my spells cost half. Now I'm doing this. And you can decide to do that if you want and really invest into it. So like my character, again, no items equipped, has 118 spell power now. Again, that's something you can do, not something I super recommend. You don't really have to do that if you don't want to. What type of items should you look for on an Alchemist? Well, Alchemist, as I mentioned before, is relatively straightforward and simple. You need anything that gives you Constitution and Intelligence, because that's good. Anything that gives you bonus to your spells, like Conjuration DCs, Transmutation DCs if you're using like some of the crowd control abilities, and whatever spell powers you need for whatever spells you're casting. Generally, you're going to want positive and negative spell powers, because you're healing and you're also dealing damage with negative spells. And then if you want poison, that's also nullification, so you want that. If you want fire, get fire. If you want cold, get cold. If you want lightning, get lightning. Pretty straightforward. Bonuses to your armor class don't matter. You're going to nuke everything before they get to you. Just look for things that give you bonuses to saves. Bonuses to your dodge maybe is kind of nice if you get a dodge item. And then things that boost your physical and magical resistance rating. As far as what weapons you should equip, should you use a weapon or dual wield? Should you use orbs? Should you use blah, 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 blah? End of the day, you don't get armor, so you have to wear robes. And when it comes to the mace and the orb here, it doesn't matter what you decide to use. Just use things that give you the spell stats. If you happen to have a bastard sword in one hand and a battle axe in the other, but it's a bastard sword of like magnetism and you need lightning spell power, and it's a battle axe of nullification, you need negative spell power, just use it. The weapon types don't matter. You don't attack anybody in this character. You just whip potions and hit people in the face. All right, so I'm going to go over the written guide here, so you have something quickly to follow along. As I said, you want to start as a alchemist. I decided to go as a gnome here. You don't have to go as a gnome. Just anything that maxes out your intelligence is nice. Alchemist is so powerful, you can just play whatever you want. But again, it's going to be better if you do happen to have that higher intelligence. It's going to be easier for you to start. relevant skills here. We already talked about that. And then as the feats, you get Alchemist feats every 4 levels. So we take the Pyrite feat, we get Insightful Courage, gives you intelligence to your will saves. We get Liquid Luck, which gives you evasion like you're a rogue. In Alchemical Studies Pyrite, and then Mental Toughness for some extra spell points. And then this character is designed to be a acid alchemist, so these are relevant acid abilities. But if you're like, Strim, I don't want to play acid, I want to play cold, I want to play fire, then just change up the words. So instead of epic spell power acid, take epic spell power fire. Instead of sign of the plane of earth, sign of the plane of fire. Really straightforward stuff, you guys. As far as the spells, as I mentioned, you're not really going to be casting a lot of damage spells, so you're going to notice I take all of the relevant acid damage spells, but other than that, if you're like, oh, I want to play cold, Strim, so I don't want to take Melt Armor and Caustic Solvent and Caustic Overload, then don't. Take the cold version of those spells. Every Alchemist spell has a alternate version, so instead of it being like, oh, there's like a fire spell at level 4 and a acid spell at level 7 or whatever, instead it's just Caustic Solvent is an AoE that does acid, and there's an equivalent one for cold and fire and lightning and a poison. The only exception to this is Vein Freeze. Vein Freeze is a cold spell, but it also applies freeze, and it freezes everything. Turns out, very good, so can recommend. Other than that, a lot of crowd control and defensive abilities, pretty straightforward. But no matter what, go learn all your spells, so you don't forget. As far as the enhancements go, in general, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to grab the Inflict Light Wounds Metamagic feat or spell-like abilities to apply to Metamagics. Then you take all of the different vials of spells. I went with Acid, Sparks, and Flame, so Lightning and Flame. Doesn't matter which one you take. Then you get to the Cure Serious Wounds Admixture. Then you grab the Color Spray, and you keep leveling up your points from there. Again, really straightforward, really easy to use. Alchemist is super duper powerful. You do a quick reset once you get to level 20, because when you're 20, you don't need your early spell-like abilities anymore, so you can reset it and kind of skip past all of that. And then as far as epic destinies go, this character ends up going into Draconic Incarnation, because Draconic just gives you raw damage and better spell cost reduction, which is good. You go Primal Avatar, because Primal Avatar has an ability here called Evergreen, which basically gives you a near infinite amount of spell points. So you want to have that while you have the Mantle of Nature active, so you can get more spell points back. And then again, Fate Singer, just because it gives you spell point cost reduction. So this character ends up having like 40 to 50% spell cost reduction at all times, and you make your Metamagics cost 0, which is one of the reasons you can just spam spells at the end game, which is really fun. And again, if you're looking at this and you're like, but Strim, I don't want to play a black dragon because I don't want to do acid, I want to do fire, where's my red dragon? Just change the words on here to be like, there's different ones for each element, so just pick the one that matches with the element that you decided to pick. All right, and so that's it. That's Alchemist. Alchemist is one of the easiest characters to play in the game. Right before recording this, I actually completely forgot how easy Alchemist was, and people in my chat were like, oh, you should play Alchemist soon, because I don't know how to play it. And then they watched me completely obliterate the entire video game with no trouble, and were like, oh wow, I didn't know Alchemist was so crazy. I was so intimidated. But then I got to explain, like, no, the reaction state's simple, you can ignore it. In fact, there's actually an option, I'm pretty sure there's an option, to turn it off. Alchemy, I think there's an alchemy option in the UI. You can really turn it off and ignore it if you want to. So if it stresses you out seeing it, you can just turn it off. Now, I don't recommend you entirely turn it off because, you know, later on, the spiking mechanic is good for doing endgame, and it's not super complicated, and it's pretty cool as a customization element, but again, it's up to you. With that being said, Alchemist, very fun, very cool, big fan, and easily one of the most powerful classes in the entire game. Very, very silly. Yeah, really fun to play. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you didn't like Alchemist or you want to try something else, check out the description for both the build guide here, as well as a link to the playlist that has all the other videos in it, because maybe you might find something else you like more. But with that being said, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. Have a good night, and I will see you later. Bye-bye. See ya. Au revoir.